Welcome. We'll just wait till everybody is here. Hey, Terry. Yeah, I don't know if you all got a chance to watch yesterday's recording, or if you were able to be there in person. Those of you who were, did you get a chance to ride the exercise? Try the double loop with a shoulder in, shoulder forward, haunches in, and so on. It'd be interesting to hear if you could make it work, if that helped, if that worked for you. What you observed? Even if it doesn't work, it's still interesting because you get information and data that helps you maybe make sense of things. Hey, a lot workout. Yeah. Yeah, well, did you get a chance to play around with the exercise? Jerry says, nice to be here. I'm sorry, I will have to leave in a few minutes. Christmas lunchtime. But already. Okay, I'll catch up yesterday and today, maybe today. Yeah. Yeah. Well, have a nice lunch. Hey, Aaron from Oregon. Oh, Jennifer from cold Alberta. I bet it's cold. Well, it's even cold here, but not as cold as where you are. So, oh, yeah, Susan too cursingly cold to try it, I bet. I've read. Yeah. Oh, if this is too cold to exercise today. No, I'm sorry to hear that. It says, hello, we'll be trying to exercise today. Very cold today. It's so freezing here. Yeah. Yeah, we get tiny little bit of night frost in the last couple of days, so not like Canada, but cold for us. Hey, Laura, from freezing Finland, I know. Lovely Sally's kitten, yeah, it's a really cute one, but noisy. Wanted to leave, so Shanna had to open the door. Well, yeah, so for those of you who weren't there yesterday, so we talked about introducing shoulder in and haunches in, and we use the double loop because you can use it to put the horse into that position of the shoulder in or the haunches in. And Maria says, I did not play specifically with the exercise, but I did go ahead and use your advice on working with my mare shoulder in. Found that I need to change my reining background. Okay, put my outside leg more back instead of forward here. Yeah, if the outside leg is too far forward in a shoulder in, for example, then you leave a door open and the haunches could swing out, and then of course the horse will lose the bend, and then they might do a leg yield or whatever. But you don't get the full benefit of the shoulder in. Yeah, so these lateral movements, they're gymnastically super helpful because they create a higher degree of suppleness in the hindquarters. They create a lateral suppleness, and they create also longitudinal, vertical suppleness in the hind legs. And you can use them to engage a hind leg and then flex it. And so especially the shoulder in related lateral movements are really good for bringing a hind leg more under the body. So you can do something with it, right? So you could flex it in the next segment of an exercise, for example, by riding a corner or a volte or turn on the haunches, or a haunches in related exercise, like the haunches in related lateral movements, they tend to flex the inside hind leg more against the ground while the outside hind leg crosses. And the shoulder in related lateral movements bring the inside hind leg under the body. So you can alternate between a shoulder in and a haunches in, or shoulder in and half pass, or counter shoulder in the renvers, and so on, to engage and flex, the hind leg that's on the inside of the bend. And once the hind leg is underneath you and it's flexing between the ground and the weight, the horse will be eager to extend the hind leg again, which is a pushing action. And this pushing action could be used for different things, right? So you could, depending on where you are and what gait you are, you could use it for an up transition. Right? If you're in the walk, you engage the hind leg and flex it. You can then ask the horse to extend that hind leg in a more vertical direction, so the horse does an up transition into a higher gait, right? Or if you're in the trot, you engage the hind legs, you flex the hind legs, you could ask the horse to push vertically up, and then you get something that develops into a passage up, later on. Or you could channel that energy in a more horizontal forward direction, and then the strides become longer. And that's what I want to talk about today, right? Lengthenings, medium trot, extended trot, especially, because they often present a certain difficulty. If you have a horse that wasn't born with a fabulous big trot, and the first lengthenings in the US already show up at first level, and then the medium trot shows up at second level, right? And in Germany, you already have the medium trot at the first level equivalent, Klasse A, which I think is a little early. If you have a warm blood sport horse, then they may be able to do it. But if you have a different breed, that doesn't have the very large gaits with lots of suspension, then they won't be able to produce a good medium trot at the lower levels. That will take more time. And the challenge for most horses is that they don't lengthen the stride so much, but they rather speed up the tempo, right? And there's different parameters of the gait that you have to keep separate in your mind. One is the stride length. One is the tempo that you can measure in beats per minute, steps per minute. Then I think of energy or impulsion as a parameter of the gait. You could use the line of travel, the angle between the horse's body and the line of travel as a parameter of the gait. And you can vary them. Of course, you could count the gait, so the rhythm of the footfall pattern as a parameter. And when you're developing the lengthenings, medium trot and canter, extended trot and canter, you have to pay especially close attention to tempo and stride length, because the horses tend to muddle them a little bit. Ideally, classically, we would like to be able to vary the stride length without changing the tempo. So in other words, when you collect the horse, the tempo shouldn't necessarily slow down. And when you lengthen the stride, the tempo shouldn't speed up, right? So it's tempo and stride length are categories that you should be able to influence. I mean, as a rider, you should be able to speed up and slow down if you want to. Like if the horse is rushy, you should be able to slow down and keep the horse's feet on the ground longer, so that now you have fewer beats per minute. You can use your weight, you can use stirrup stepping and so on to slow the tempo down. If the horse is kind of sluggish and the hind legs stay on the ground too long and then get too far out behind, you may want to speed the hind legs up, and you can use your lower leg for that. Tell the horse to come on, pick that hind leg up, and pick it up earlier than you normally would. And then you get more beats per minute, you get a quicker tempo. So you can adjust the tempo to where the horse can move with the greatest efficiency and the greatest suppleness, relaxation, impulsion, and so on. And if the tempo is too fast or too slow, horses will tend to lose balance, and they will tend to become stiff. They tend to brace the back, especially when they're too fast. When they're too slow, they can sometimes overload the hind legs, or the hind legs get too far out behind, and then they just get strung out and they fall in the forehand. So that's one parameter of the gait that you have to monitor, and sometimes you have to adjust it a little bit. If you feel like it's too slow or it's too fast, you can regulate that a little bit. And when you're starting to work with a young horse or with a rehab horse that was badly trained, you will find that in terms of stride length, there is typically one particular stride length in which the horse can find his balance under the rider and relax. And maybe one particular tempo, one particular stride length, and then one particular posture in terms of the engagement of the hind leg, flexion of the hind leg, elevation of the front end, longitudinal flexion. There's like this one posture, one tempo, one stride length, and where the horse can relax. And if you try to vary anything, they lose balance, they tighten, they invert, and so on. But over time, as the horses become stronger, more balanced, more supple, they should also become more adjustable, right? So that you can vary the frame, right, from that place, comfort zone where he feels happy. You should be able to let the horse stretch forward, downward. You should then eventually be able to collect and elevate a little bit more, but that is an incremental process that takes a little time, right? Initially, you feel like, okay, there's just this one Goldilocks zone where everything is good and we're happy. And just 1 millimeter outside of that, tiny little longer strides, shorter strides, quicker, slower, and everything falls apart, right? So sometimes that's really fragile, especially when you have a horse that doesn't have a good sense of rhythm. There are horses that don't have a good sense of rhythm, where it's really challenging to establish a steady tempo, because every little thing, every move you make, every time you breathe at the wrong moment, the horse loses the tempo, loses the balance, right? They're difficult to ride. And there are others that are like rhythm machines where you couldn't mess up the tempo if you tried. They're so stable, they're like a metronome, and they just keep going. They're much easier to ride. So part of this adjustability training is that from this Goldilocks zone where the horse is happy, you want to be able to shorten the strides, and you want to be able to lengthen the strides over time, right? And so then from this original natural trot, you can shorten the strides until the horse does a piaffe, and you can lengthen the stride until you have the extended trot. And that's quite a range, right, between the piaffe and the extended trot. That's quite a big adjustment, so to speak. And naturally, that takes time. It takes a certain amount of strength, takes a certain amount of suppleness. To lengthen the stride, that's a pushing action, so it's an extension of the hind legs. And of course, if the hind legs are already more or less extended because the croup is up or the hind legs are dragging behind, then there is no room to extend more. So all the horse can do is run a little faster, right? But there's no real lengthening. If you want a true lengthening of the stride with the same tempo, the horse will have to gather up his hind legs underneath his body. He will have to fold the hind legs. Basically, it's the equivalent of us doing squats. And then out of that squat, you can ask the horse to extend the joints, to push a little bit more against the ground, push the body mass up and forward, and fly a little bit more, so that you have a little bit longer suspension phase. So the ground cover will increase. And yeah, like I said, if you have a horse that is not born with a fabulous medium trot, then this can take a number of years before the horse has developed that strength and suppleness, adjustability. Because, of course, as the hind leg pushes, the body forward, right? The stride is longer than the other hind leg that reaches forward will have to catch the body mass, and flex its joints and then push off again, right? And of course, the bigger the strides, the bigger the power is that the greater the force is that the landing hind leg then has to be able to absorb and catch, right? And if the flexion and the pushing or extension of the hind legs isn't in good balance, the horse will fall on the forehand and run, or they will get heavy and lean on the rein and maybe run in addition. So they have to have fairly strong hindquarters in order to do a true lengthening, right? And that comes over time. It develops over time. When you're riding, when you're training lateral, when you're training the lengthening, it usually doesn't work to just go forward and fly around the arena, right? So a lot of people, I think, will just go across the diagonal, down the long side, and go forward more. And if the horse isn't in a good balance, if the hind legs aren't engaged enough, if they're not flexed enough under the body, then all they will do is put the horse on the forehand and make the horse heavy in front and stiff, and the horse just runs. So before you can think of lengthening the dog, she was outside. So before you can ask the horse for a lengthening, it makes sense to ride something that engages a hind leg and then folds it under the body, and then you can ask to go forward. And the aid for the lengthening is really is a seat aid. It's not the lower leg. A lot of people drive with the lower leg, but the lower leg really tells the horse to pick up the hind leg. So the lower leg is much more likely to create a quicker tempo and make the horse pick the hind legs up earlier, so to speak. But for the lengthening, you really want the grounded hind leg to stay on the ground and push more. And that's something you can do better with a seat aid. I use my thighs and knees. You can give a little impulse from both thighs and knees towards the knee roll. Like for the skiers, it's a little bit like the snowplow position, and pushing your knees a little towards each other, like into the knee roll of the saddle, if the saddle has one. And you engage your back muscles, and you can bring your pelvis a little bit more forward between the elbows. And I tend to lighten the seat a little bit, because if the grounded hind leg pushes more and I want the airborne hind leg to take a bigger step, belly muscles of the horse have to contract more, the back has to lift more, and I have to allow that. I have to make room with my seat so the horse can lift the back and stretch the top line. And when the horse takes longer strides, they're also supposed to lengthen the frame a little bit. Like when I was a teenager, that was still taught that the nose has to come a little bit more in front of the vertical. Like the judges, even in the 70s, 80s, wanted to see the lengthening of the frame, that the top line stretches a little bit more. It wasn't, it would have been considered a mistake when the neck stayed in the same frame as in the piaffe or the collected trot. When you lengthen the stride, they wanted to see really a longer neck, the nose coming forward a little bit, so that everything matches and everything fits together. The hind legs, the back, the neck, the poll, the skull, everything has to kind of form a harmonious unit in a sense, right? And then as you go back from the lengthening to a more collected gait, then of course the hind legs have to sit, flex more, elevate the forehand more, and then also the neck will then arch a little bit more. The nose will come a little bit closer to the vertical in the collected trot, for example, and in the medium and extended trot, the nose has to reach forward a little bit. That kind of fell by the wayside with the whole Wilco thing, right? So that wasn't done anymore. But that disrupts the flow of the movement, the flow of the energy if you hold the horse too much in front. Yeah, so the lengthening aid, like I said, is a driving seat aid, and I wouldn't recommend sitting on your back pocket and then pushing the seat bones forward, which is what you often see, right? Where people lean behind the vertical and they push their seat bones forward, because that will tend to make the horse's back drop, and then the horse often gets pushed onto the forehand when the rider does that, when they push with their seat bones, like when there's sort of the scooping action with the seat bones, that often pushes the horse into the ground, onto the bit, and then they're heavy, and then they run. And I always want my horses to come up in front when I lengthen the stride. So it feels a little bit like an airplane that takes off, where you feel like every stride, the withers come a little bit higher, the top line stretches a little bit more, so that every stride is a little bigger than the previous one. I like when it builds like that. And when you first begin to work on lengthenings, of course, you can't expect the horse to be able to do a fully fledged medium trot across an entire diagonal or along the entire long side. But initially, it's pretty modest, right? Just a little bit of lengthening and maybe only 3 or 4 strides, and then you bring the horse back to the more collected trot or canter. And then you can send the horse out. So on one long side or on one diagonal, you could lengthen 2 or 3 times, right? A little bit forward, a little bit collected, a little bit forward, a little bit more collected, and so on. So that as a rule of thumb, you only ask the horse to make the trot or the canter as big as both of you can handle, so the horse stays in balance and the horse stays on the seat. So you feel like you can still regulate the gait and the balance with your seat, and the horse doesn't just crush onto the reins, and then you're holding the whole horse up. And you only want to lengthen as many strides as the horse can handle in balance, and as you can hold the horse on the seat. As soon as you feel like the horse kind of drops out from underneath you and runs, then you've either pushed the horse a little bit too much forward, or you've stayed in the lengthening one stride too many. And then you have to recoup, bring the horse back, and rebalance the horse. So for returning, shortening the stride again, collecting the horse again, I think of making the movement of the back more vertical, less forward, and up, but more down and up. So I usually then stretch my legs, try to make myself really tall, and then press the landing hind leg into the ground, and then let it bounce back more in a more vertical direction. So I'm thinking of changing the vector of the force of the hind leg, right? If you send the pushing power, the vector of that pushing power more horizontally forward, then you get a longer stride. If you try to release the compressed hind leg vertically up, the stride becomes shorter and a little taller. And then you can take the power and the energy of the medium or extended trot with you into the more collected trot. So the collected gait is not slow or listless or sluggish or sleepy, but same amount of energy, same amount of power as in the medium trot or medium canter. And you take that with you into the collected trot or canter, and you just direct this power of the hind legs in a more up and down direction rather than a forward and up direction. So that way you're not just, holding or pulling on the rein, but you're using your body to redirect the energy more up and down. Yeah, so these are little simple things, in a way that I think don't get taught enough, or people are not aware enough. So they often just think too much competition, from this ladder to that ladder, go forward, full speed ahead, so to speak. And and the horse can do it. So you have to prepare the horse. You have to then lengthen the stride without speeding up if you can, shorten again, and so on. And so it develops gradually over time, and it can take 2-3 years before a horse has developed a medium trot. So don't feel bad if your horse has trouble with the lengthenings or with the medium or extended gaits. It's just something that takes time. It's a gymnastic development process where you have to improve the strength and the suppleness of the hind legs, and this adjustability, of sending the energy more forward or more up and down, or lengthening the stride, shortening the stride without speeding up, and so on. So to practice that, you basically follow that relatively simple formula of engaging a hind leg and maybe flexing it under the body and then asking the horse to go forward. And by the way, in the Spanish riding school tradition, they always lengthen the stride from the inside hind when the inside hind is on the ground. And I assume the reason is because when you're riding a circle, any curved line, the outside hind leg is the more pushing one, the inside is the more supporting, carrying, flexing one, because the inside is, hip is a little ahead of the outside hip and so on. So the inside hind leg then naturally supports a little bit more. And to balance it out, we often half hold into the outside hind to ask the more pushing hind leg to sit and carry a little bit more, right? And we ask the inside hind leg to push a little bit more. And in the canter, by the way, it's the same. In the canter, the outside hind leg is the more pushing one, the inside hind is the more carrying one, because of course the inside hind always touches down ahead of the outside one in the canter. So that's the background information that is useful to keep in mind. And I find it helpful to target a specific leg. Like when I lengthen the stride, I can focus on, for example, the inside hind leg, bring it under the body with something, flex it, and then ask it to push and go forward. So that increases your chances of success, I find. And of course, there are lots of ways in which you can practice this. We chose, let me see, an exercise. Let me just make sure I have the right window so I can show it to you. Again, it's a relatively simple exercise where you don't need a super advanced horse. So it's something I like to use actually with my horse too sometimes. You can ride a 20-meter circle, for example, and enlarge the circle 2 strides. That's the so-called first test of the inside hind leg in the Spanish riding school tradition. So you're moving the horse 1 horse's width to the outside, within 2 strides of 2 touchdowns of the inside hind leg. Hips and shoulders should move out simultaneously and cover the same distance sideways. So there's already a little bit of a lateral movement in a sense. It's a simple one, but it is a bit of a lateral movement, and it brings the inside hind leg under the body. It shifts the weight to the outside. And when the inside hind leg is on the ground, you can ask the inside hind to push more. So it, and you can ask it in such a way that you get just a more powerful trot, more powerful working trot, or more powerful collector trot. But you can also ask the horse to really lengthen the stride. And so that's called the third test of the inside hind leg in the Spanish riding school tradition. And the way we were taught to do it was that you count 6 touchdowns of the inside hind, and then you ask that inside hind to push on 1 and 3 and 5, for example. So every other stride, because if you push every stride, the horse may start rushing, may start to speed up the tempo. So that's a very simple format that you can use. That would be a really good introduction for a horse who's never done that, right? So you enlarge and then count. So the enlarging aid is given when the inside hind is up, right? So you move your body mass out, swing your pelvis out, ask with your inside leg to engage the inside hind. And then when the inside hind leg touches down, then you give these the pushing seat aid, to lengthen the stride. Now, between enlarging and going forward, you could half hold into the inside hind leg if you feel like the inside hind isn't flexing enough, so I'm not getting a good enough push. Then you could have an intermediate step in there when the inside hind is down. You could half hold with one of the reins, and you could step into the inside stirrup. So it would be an enlarge, then a slow down 2 strides, and then ask the horse to go forward. And then you will probably get a pretty good result for the beginning. It may not be like the perfect medium trot, but you will probably feel that something's happening, that the horse is now making a little bit bigger effort or pushing a little bit more. If you do this in both directions, you'll find that one hind leg gives you a better response than the other. Typically, I find that the hind leg on the so-called stiffer side, the naturally more convex side, has more pushing power. So you get probably a bigger reaction or a bigger trot out of that. And in the hollow direction, the hind leg is usually, the inside hind is not as strong, doesn't have as much pushing power, so you may not get any noticeable result at first, but it will change over time. The more you engage a hind leg, the more you flex it, the more the horse will want to go forward. The horse will be motivated to go forward when you flex it more. By the way, this is something you could even use when you're showing, so you could do the enlarge in the corner, second corner of the short side. Then, right after that corner, you could slow down, half hold into the inside hind leg, and then you could lengthen either across the diagonal or down the long side. And the judges probably won't see that you were enlarging into the corner, so you can do it in a slightly concealed way, right? And so you can apply that directly to a competition test if you show. When I ask for lengthening, I've sort of adjusted this a little bit, and instead of asking every other stride, I tend to ask twice in a row and then let the horse cruise a little bit, right? And then collect the horse again, and then maybe send him out again a little bit. If you feel that the horse is speeding up instead of lengthening, you could use stirrup stepping and half holds to tell the horse slow down. So you can basically ask the horse go forward, but slow down, keep the tempo. Lengthen slowly, lengthen slowly. So if you give your driving seat every other stride on 1, 3, and 5, you would have time 1, 2, 4, and 6 to slow down a little bit into the inside hind leg if you needed to. Right? So you could step into the inside hind, maybe inside stirrup, outside rein when the inside hind is down, and then slow, and then go forward, slow, go forward. It's complicated for the rider, but that's just in case your horse speeds up. You could try that with a little luck, and if your not asking for too much lengthening. If you just ask for a little incremental lengthening, then that may not be so much of an issue. The horse may be able to keep the tempo a little better. Yeah, so try this in both directions, and I would ride a big circle for that 20-meter circle, right? So, you know, if you do it on the vaulter, you can't really lengthen a whole lot, right? But if you're on a big circle, you can. Lengthening the stride on a circle has certain advantages compared to lengthening on a straight line, right? When you're lengthening on a circle, the lateral bend helps you to keep the horse round, keep the horse on the bit, because a lot of horses will just drop the back and come off the bit and run, right? With if you ride a big circle, then chances of keeping the horse round and on the bit and through the back are a little bit better than if you go straight. Yeah, so I'm just trying to think. I mean, of course, you could also use a different exercise for engaging the inside hind. I mean, there are competition tests where you ride a shoulder in on the long side, like for half the long side, and then you go across the short diagonal and lengthen. That's a really good one too. So that makes gymnastic sense as well. You could half pass and then lengthen parallel to the long side, or leg yield from the wall and lengthen parallel to the long side. So they're all kind of variations on the same theme. Engage a hind leg and then ask it to push, or engage, slow down into it, flex the hind leg, and then ask it to push. And yeah, in practice, I don't usually ask for lengthening for the entire long side or the entire diagonal until much later in the training. And initially, it's just little increments and just a few strides, come back, little increments, and come back. Yeah, so that's the trot. For the canter, of course, you can also engage the inside hind leg before the lengthening. And in the canter, you have kind of two options. You could lengthen from the outside hind. That's when the forehand is up in the air. So then you ask specifically the outside hind leg to push more, or you can ask the inside hind leg to push. That's the second beat when your seat gets pulled forward. Asking in the first beat when the withers come up or the forehand comes up has the advantage that you have a better chance of keeping the horse uphill in the canter. Because of course, if you lengthen the stride in the canter, the danger is that the horse kind of falls on the forehand and then runs, into the ground. And then it's difficult to return from that lengthening in the canter to a working canter or collected canter. So with most horses, I ask in the first beat when the outside hind is down, except if you have one of those rocking horse PREs that just go up and down, they don't cover any ground, then I would ask in the second beat when my seat gets pulled forward anyway by the motion of the canter. And then to return from the medium canter to the collected canter, I emphasize the lifting of the forehand in the first beat. So I just try to ride the forehand higher and higher and higher, and then the horse can collect himself without losing power, and then you can come through the corner without the horse falling out or without inverting and so on, right? So that has worked pretty well for me. Yeah, so not as much theory as with the lateral movements, right? So conceptually, lengthenings are actually fairly simple and straightforward. It just takes a long time to train them, takes a long time to develop them. But we can take a look at comments and questions. Let me look at here the Q&A section here. Veronica says, I find it difficult to sit the lengthened trot. I grab with my knees and bounce. How do you sit a good trot, and what muscles do you use to stabilize yourself? And now I rise until I can sit properly. Good question. Yeah, in training, it's perfectly all right to rise to the trot in the lengthening. To sit the trot, if you have a horse that is difficult to sit, it can help to shorten the stirrups a little bit. And when I had to ride warmbloods with really big gaits and I found them a little difficult, I would try to create a certain stretch through the front of my body. It's like I was picturing like the bow and arrow, right? When you pull the bowstring, you push the middle of the bow forward and then the top and bottom come back. So I would emulate that by bringing my pelvis a little up and forward between my elbows. And then I would try to draw the stirrups back with my feet and my toes and bring my shoulders back enough so I could feel it's almost like a stretch or an elastic tension through my quads and the front of my body. And that gave me enough elasticity in my seat to sit a big trot. So that helped me. And yeah, little shortening the stirrup a hole can make a big difference when you have a horse that's uncomfortable. Yeah, some horses are just hard and I mean they get softer with training, but some horses have like mechanically a little bit rougher gait, others have a softer gait. And then if you have the amplitude of the bigger trots, then that can become a challenge to sit, right? And you need to use your hips and knees and ankles really as your shock absorbers, right? You can't absorb a big trot just with your vertebrae, that there's not enough give in the spine, not enough room for extension and flexion in your own spine. So you need to use hips, knees, and ankles. And that's why if you shorten stirrups a little bit, then you create more space where from your neutral seat, the joints are flexed enough that there is enough space to accommodate even the biggest trot. Then, so. And yeah, so that's how I would approach it. And Susan says here, are medium and extended trot the same thing? In theory, no. In practice, you often can't really tell the difference. In the extended trot, the horse should overstrut even more. Like when I was a teenager, we learned that in the working trot, the hind legs should step into the footprints of the front legs, and in the medium trot, they were supposed to step like one hoof breadth or 1 to 2 hoof breadths in front of the footprints of the front legs, and then in the extended trot even more. But that's very warmblood centric. If you have an Arabian or fjord horse, that's probably not going to happen. Or if you have a Lipizan, it's not going to happen. So yeah, the medium and extended gaits are sort of relative also to the horse's natural gaits and the horse's conformation. I mean, the medium trot, there's just the horse flies a little bit more, and so it has a little longer suspension phase, and has a little different feel than the working trot or the collected trot. And a real extended trot, a lot of horses tend not to reach it, or you can't tell really a difference. Even when you watch a competition, you often can't tell, was that an extended trot or was that a medium trot, even with a warm blood. That's not even really sure how realistic that is. Actually, I'm just thinking that in the 19th century, the old authors distinguished 3 types of trot. There, what they called a medium trot would be the equivalent of our working trot. That was sort of the neutral, normal trot, and then they had a collected trot, and then they had an extended trot. And that actually seems a little closer to reality to me, to say, well, you have the normal home base kind of, comfort zone trot, and then more collected and more forward or longer strides. I think for most horses, I think that's a more realistic distinction because medium trot to extended trot, very difficult to really show that or develop that. So it's more of maybe more of a theoretical kind of construct than a reality for most horses. Yeah. And then Susan says, is there a groundwork or in-hand equivalent of a pushing seat aid? You can't push on the ground, right? You can collect the horse more and then you can let the horse go forward. And you have to keep a little bit of connection with the rein. If you yield too much, the horse falls apart and runs. And you have to always keep a little bit of the recycling going on. So, and then you may have to ask the horse to go forward more. You can touch with the whip, maybe touch and keep the whip on the hind end. It could be on the side of the croup, and you can touch, you can press a little bit so that you get more of a longer stride. And that reminds me, I forgot to mention, when you're riding the lengthening in the trot, I talked about the lengthening of the frame, which means your hands have to release that a little bit. But if you release too quickly or if you release too much, then the horse falls apart, right? Then they fall into a hole and then they're on the forehand. So you always have to keep some contact and keep recycling the energy so that you never lose touch with the hind leg. And you should feel the hind leg in your hand as the hind leg touches down. The horse should step into the rein contact, into the bit with the hind leg on each side. And then you can lengthen a little bit, you can release the rein a little bit, but not to the point where you lose the connection to the hind leg. That's a little bit tricky sometimes. If you yield too much, if you yield too abruptly, then you lose the connection, and then the horse loses that stretch through the top line and crushes on the forehand and runs. So that took me a while to figure out before I understood it and before I was able to do it. And my teachers didn't quite explain it that way, so I had to figure this out on my own. But so that's an important little detail. Yield a little bit, but not too much, not too abruptly. Jane says here, I've just realized why my mare did lengthen sometimes and other times she didn't. Think you will do this on my next ride. Oh, good. Yeah, try it out. Heather Williams says, I've been told that you have to wait in the direction you're going, and then I've been told to wait on the outside. Please, would you give me your view, sensitive horse? Are you talking about lengthening or talking about the lateral movements? In lateral movements, the German tradition says you always sit on the inside of the bend in lateral movements. In France, Spain, Portugal, they tend to sit in the direction of the movement. I tend to also sit in the direction with my weight in the direction of the movement, so I can take the horse with me and I'm not pushing the horse away from me. But if you're riding a shoulder in and the horse is already a little bit more advanced, more confirmed, you can bring the inside hind underneath you and then you can sit on it to flex it. So you can, if you sit more on the outside hind leg in the shoulder in, you emphasize the sideways movement. And if you then sit on the inside hind leg, when the inside hind touches down, you can flex that inside hind. You can basically collect the horse into the inside hind. So in the shoulder, you can do both. With a younger horse, I would always sit in the direction of travel. But once they're a little bit more advanced, sometimes it makes sense to sit on that inside hind and flex that to strengthen the hind leg. Yeah. So let me go to the chat. Maria said I did not specifically. Oh yeah, that's a shoulder. I answered that. But Francis was saying black screen. Yeah, sometimes when I share the screen, some people only see a black screen. But it's individual people. I don't know if it helps to exit Zoom and enter again. I don't know. And you could only see the top of my head, no face. That's weird. I don't know why. Because I can see my face. Shannon says, can you suggest other exercises at the Trot for a more advanced horse? Yeah, I mean, you can use the shoulder in or the half pass too. That's a really nice preparation. If you ride a half pass for a few strides, really collect into the inside hind, and then you exit the half pass, you go straight parallel to the long side. Like you could go from the long side to the first quarter line, for example, right, in the half pass, and then on the quarter line, lengthen the stride. And if the arena is long enough, you could even collect again, half pass to the center line and lengthen on the center line. Or you could do shoulder in on the long side, a few strides, maybe lengthen to the center line, half halt. You keep when you lengthen, I would straighten the horse, right? So you really exit your half pass, make the horse straight, go forward, and then of course collect, bend, half pass, and so on. Or in shoulder in on the long side, lengthen to the center line. That's actually a really good exercise to in the shoulder in, grab that inside hind leg, and then when the inside hind is down, go forward on a diagonal. Basically, you ride forward in line with the spine. If you draw a line along the spine of the horse in the shoulder in and just lengthen this, out between the ears and then follow that line. And then when you get to the center line, half halt into the outside hind and go right back into a shoulder in on that center line. And just have to watch that the angle doesn't get too steep. Then you actually have to move the shoulder to the outside so that you don't get too much angle. It's weird because it's called shoulder in, but you feel like I have to move the shoulder to the outside in order not to have too much angle. And then if the arena is long enough, you could go lengthen again, after a few strides, shoulder in on the center line, go forward again, maybe to the opposite long side or so. So you can play with these. Those are really good. They really strengthen the hind legs and they make the horse sharp. So can really wake the horse up. And when you do this lengthening across a diagonal and then you collect into the outside hind and take the horse into a shoulder in, that's an enormous amount of down pressure into the outside hind, and they really have to sit and really collects and strengthens the outside hind. So that's the inside hind pushing and the outside hind catches it, flexes, shoulder in, and then again from the inside hind, push again. So you can play with those elements. They're super effective. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, Tony, I like the presentation. Thank you. Laura says, my darling old Dublin breed Heinz 57 really struggled with a medium trot. Yeah. That's typical, right? For the ones that are not specifically, sport horse, warm bloods, they often don't come with a spectacular medium or extended trot. Right? So Laura says, we had literally tried every exercise in the book, but my brilliant trainer always had just one more idea. So she said, just ride him forward, just throw the reins at him and speed trot him. After a few rounds of this, suddenly he started lengthening. So we made a fuss and told him he was amazing. That day he realized what I was trying to explain, and big trot became his new favorite exercise. At this point, he was already quite well trained. It started piaffe canter pirouettes, but the medium trot had seemed impossible. Yeah, I've heard of that. And actually, one of my old teachers in Germany did that with a horse too. And if it works, it's great. But I think there is also a big risk that the horses just fall on the forehead and run, and that they just keep running and they never discover that there's the medium trot. So I would always I would hesitate to do that because it's hard on the legs, right? If they just run with the back dropped and inverted, it's hard on the joints, hard on the back. That's why I'd be careful with that. So course, if you have a very advanced horse and you're starting to work on passage or towards passage, then the passage will help the medium trot. There's a correlation there. I mean, one of the traditional classical ways of teaching the passage was to start from medium trot and then, slow the tempo down and then, but that's usually not a very easy road to the passage, but so vice versa, if you've taught the horse already the passage or the beginnings of the passage, then you can use that slower, swingier trot, for lengthening the stride, and then the medium trot will stay a little slower in the tempo. So that's something to play with. So yeah. Laura said I've never had to do that with any other horse, but we just could not work it out until that day. I mean, if it works out, great. I just not something I would typically recommend because I think this can be really hard on the legs, and so be careful. Shannon says, how does the passage help? So passage trot and lengthen. Yeah, you can try that. I mean, if the issue that the horse has is that he speeds up, right, and doesn't discover the lengthening, he just goes faster. And some horses think driving aids mean, run faster. So you could teach the horse this passage trot where you essentially slow the tempo down compared to their normal working or collected trot. And if you can then think of lengthening the stride in the passage, and you have a chance that the horse then discovers the medium trot. So lengthening the stride without running, and without speeding up. So it's something to play with, something to try. What was it? I think it was Peter Spohr, the Logik in der Reitkunst. It's from the early 1900s. He talks about a flying passage, and I always wonder, he has some funny terms, and I always wonder what that actually means, but I think that is basically a rhythm of the passage, but long stride, so that could be something like a medium trot maybe, or a passage with long stride. So you could try that, lengthen and shorten the stride in the passage. I mean, that could be an exercise in itself, right? If you shorten the stride in the passage, then you end up with a passage on the spot. Some horses have the same tempo in the piaffe and the passage, which makes the transitions a little easier, right? Because you only have to change the stride length. You don't have to change stride length and tempo. And most horses have a little bit quicker piaffe tempo than passage tempo. Then you have to change both variables or both parameters of the gait, and that's more difficult. So if you play with a stride length in your passage, you may find that you get a better medium or better extended trot as a result. So yeah. Ever says I found that trot to canter and trot to counter canter really helps the medium trot. Yeah, could be. It's good. That's a good suggestion. Lorelei says, if you're working on lengthening from a rising trot, how would you give the seat aid? When your seat is in the saddle, I would do, as I land, give a little this impulse with my thighs and knees, and it's like squeezing the horse forward for a brief moment, and then go up again, and then, so horses typically figure this driving aid out pretty quickly. They learn that very quickly. And respond by pushing a little bit more with the hind leg. Laura says, Dublin Passage always stayed beyond our reach. He had no natural boing in his start, but had a great walk and canter. I think if I discovered you guys when he was a youngster, we probably would have got that piaffe found easy. Yeah, that's often like that, and there are horses that find the piaffe easy. Those are ones that don't have a lot of natural suspension, and they're a little quicker. So for them, the piaffe can be relatively easy to find, but maybe no passage, right? And there are horses that find the passage easier, and then the piaffe is a little trickier. So yeah. Mm. Which one would you train first, Piaffe or Passage? Well, classically, you always teach the Piaffe first. All the old authors basically say, do the Piaffe first, otherwise you can run into problems if you do the Passage first. Of course, if the horse offers you the Passage first, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to tell him, I don't want the Passage, So, my student Kristen's horse, Kristen from Canada, she had a little bit son who had talent for the passage and he discovered that passage is easier than some of the other things we asked him to do. So he offered it very early in training, actually way too early. But then, so we have to be diplomatic. On the one hand, you don't want to hurt his feelings and tell him, no, passage is bad, but it's like, so we took it a little bit, let him have fun with it a little bit, and then said, okay, now let's get back to what we were doing. So we never really asked for the passage. We would indulge him a little when he offered it, and then try to teach him the Piaffe, and he learned the Piaffe then too. So and he ended up being able to do both. But with those horses that have the real talent, you have to be careful that you don't get ambitious with the passage and really develop it, and then you lose the horse maybe never discovers the Piaffe. But at the same time, you never want to tell the horse that passage is a bad thing, or you don't want the passage. Just like with flying changes, you never want the horse to get the idea that flying changes are not allowed, right? As you're training for counter canter, second level or whatever. Some people then punish the horse if they accidentally change leads, and then when they get to third level and they need the changes, the horse has internalized that changes are bad. I get punished if I do a flying change, and then that's it, right? So with things like that, you have to sometimes be a little bit diplomatic and indulge the horse a little, and then say, okay, now you had fun with that, let's get back to what I wanted to do. So yeah. The horse as my quarter horse offers passage at times, or he also uses it as an evasion. Yeah. Yeah, you have to be then you have to look and feel, how does he do the passage? Some horses then do these sort of hovering strides, Schwebetritte, they call it in German, where the horse is actually hollow and the hind leg is out, and they just sort of pretend they're passaging, but it's not real. And then you want to send the horse forward and get out of it and get the horse engaged and round and through the back again. But so if the horse offers you something that looks and feels like the real thing, then you can work with it. Right? Shannon says, I have that issue with the Piaffe when collecting the walk. She offers it right away, still trying to figure that out. Yes, that's true. The Piaffe can be easier for some horses than a collected walk, right? You can set things up so you're asking for more energy in the walk, maybe more collection, and you're asking for more power. And then diagonal steps are a little bit more energy efficient than the 4-beat of the walk. So then you have to, be careful with play with the energy level, play with the degree of the collection and so on, so that keep the horse in the walk, and it's not so easy sometimes. Right? Laura had the same problem. Jill Hedford says, years ago, passage trot was frowned upon. Now it appears to be a good thing. Am I mistaken? No, things have shifted. You're right. Horses are bred more, I think, for that kind of trot. And so what the old masters always said is that you have to watch out that you can clearly distinguish between a collected trot and a passage, so that you as a rider can do the collected trot or you can do the passage. when it kind of all blends together and you can't separate them, then you have a problem. Or if somebody who watches you can tell what that's supposed to be, then that's not good. And that's, what you see in the show ring, like when you watch people in competitions, it's often hard to tell what that's supposed to be. Is that supposed to be a passage? Yeah, because it has sort of that slow rhythm and the suspension, but the strides are really too long for a passage. Or is it a trot? No, it has the stride length of the trot, but somehow the tempo is too slow for a real trot, right? So that judges rewarded that kind of trot for a number of years. So people rode the horses like that on purpose, and I think the breeders started breeding them for that. But yeah, the normal collected trot has a slightly quicker tempo than the passage. The passage is slower, and you should see and feel a clear difference between the collected trot and the passage. What you definitely don't want are these hovering strides where the horse is behind the aids or hollow back and out behind and so on. That would not be healthy, or it's not pleasant to ride either, right? So, and those are some of the challenges with passage work, right? That you can always clearly distinguish collected trot, passage, and when the horse passages, he's supposed to stay round and engage behind and not inverted, and not so easy, right? So Jennifer says here, when Riptide gets frustrated or confused, his go-to is canter PF. It's really a thing. On the plus side, we can canter sideways across the poles for the working and equitation competitions now. Jennifer says, I've had success introducing lengthened stride a trot by doing it on a hill on a trail ride. Yes, that helps. Uphill, they're less likely to speed up. Horses seem to like to go forward uphill. Yes, I don't let them canter. Next time on the same trail, they seem to associate this place with a bigger trot on a hill. The horse is naturally more underneath himself and has to push. Yes, exactly. Been able to eventually get medium trot this way too. I might give a certain sound cue when I'm doing this, when I ask for lengthened stride in the arena, and give the same aids, the same sound cue, and then the penny drops and the horse remembers. That's clever. Yeah, you can do that. It's true uphill, the hind legs have to push more. When you go downhill, they have to sit and collect more. So if you're walking the horse down the hill and you're sitting on the hind legs and you're shortening the stride a little bit, try to keep the horse in balance. Some horses will also start to diagonalize the step and start piaffing, if you go down the hill, hit the walk. And yeah, up the hill in the trot, a lot of horses will probably try to go forward more because that's more comfortable, it's easier. And yeah, you can definitely develop the medium trot. And if you then combine it with a voice aid, voice command, you can build a bridge so the horse understands in the arena what you want. Yeah, it's not a bad idea. The horse the dog wants to move again. Oh, here's the Q&A. Oh, Flo says, thank you for the detailed explanations. Also, thanks to all who contributed by asking questions. You're welcome. Tony says, can you save this lecture? So I would like to listen again. A lot of light bulbs were going off for me. Yeah, it'll be in the course platform, I think, for the workshop, and you can watch that until, I don't know, sometime in January, I think. Unless you're registered as a VIP member, and then you get it forever. Then it's on your course platform. Elizabeth says, what's your view on counting strides between 2 points to see how effectively you're collecting and extending? Yeah, that's a good way to do it, actually. Colby Quirker used to do that. He had us count strides and then add one or subtract one or so. And he said, I guess in the Spanish riding school, they were ambitious. They would try to add 3 strides, or like count the strides on the long side, for example. Like as you exit the first corner of the long side, count the strides of the inside hind leg till you enter the second corner, and then try to add 3 strides on the next long side, which means you have to collect more, shorten the strides. But adding 3 strides is super difficult. If you play with that, try to add 1 stride for collection, or try to reduce the number of strides by 1 for lengthening. You'll be surprised how difficult that is. If you have a 40-meter arena, 1 stride difference will feel huge. Like if you can take 1 stride out, you feel like, man, I'm flying, I'm, extend the trot and so on. And it's just 1 stride. Right? And or if you add 1 stride in, you feel like, oh my God, we're really collected here. So it's a good way to measure it. It's a good sort of a feedback basically you can get. On the circle, right? The average sized horse, 20-meter circle, will take 6 strides per quarter circle. And then you can try to add 1 stride per quarter or reduce one stride. That's actually, not easy to do, right? But it's a good idea to play with that. Yeah, Terry knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's a great little exercise. Jane says, yes, Stella could feel like she's taking off to fly on her hacks, but it's so much wind too much wind between my ears. Yeah, yeah. Jill says, I have a PRE who's naturally more of a leg mover than a back mover, yes, which will help immobilize and use his back more. Raised walk poles or raised trot poles, addressed slowly. Well, you can play with poles. The They start using the back more when you do a lot of bending, turning, sidestepping, so combinations of serpentines with lateral movements, figure eights with lateral movements, lots of, where the rib cage has to move and engage one hind leg, engage the other hind leg, and so on. So, and then maybe collect and let the horse stretch a little bit, collect, make the horse sit, let the horse stretch again, things like that, so that you really supple the horse in all directions. And then they should start swinging more, and they should start using their backs more. Stirrup stepping combinations can be really good. Like diagonal stepping patterns can be good. Triangular stepping patterns can be good too. Yeah. Jill says that was really helpful engagement. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. PREs are sometimes a little stuck in the back, or they have very little movement in the back, and then you have to, through the bending in motion kind of work, you can create more movement of the rib cage, up and down movement in the back. PREs rock. I like them too. It's just every breed, every type of horse has its specialty or its idiosyncrasies, its strengths and weaknesses, right? You have to, work with it basically. And he says, will the exercise presented in this workshop be available as PDF downloads? They should be. They should be. I think they are. Couldn't find a download button for yesterday's exercise on the platform. Yeah, Jennifer says, Penny, in the platform, you'll find everything. It should be there. Otherwise, you can send an email to riderdressage@gmail.com. And the team will help you. So you should find the PDF, you should find the recordings. Recordings can take a day or two sometimes before they're downloaded and ready and so on, or uploaded and ready. But the team will do their best to get it up soon. Yeah. Yeah, so if you have time later today or tomorrow, depending on where you are in the world, if you still have time, daylight left today to ride, maybe you get a chance to try it, or otherwise tomorrow. Play a little with it, and like I said, don't expect miracles, right? Don't expect like the perfect medium trot right off the bat, but build it incrementally. It's great if you can feel like there's a little bit more power there, a little bit more powerful push, and the horse maybe lets himself fly a little bit more, and then build it a little bit, few strides, lengthen and collect, and maybe try again and come back again. So these transitions a little, engage, flex, push, engage, flex, push. That will over time build a medium trot or extended trot. Just if you have a horse that wasn't born with one, you have to basically build one, and that will take 2-3 years. So it's not something you can do in a weekend clinic. So. Yeah, when I was still clinicking, people would sometimes say, "Oh, I want to work on medium trot. That's a great weakness." And it's like, I'm only gonna be here for 2 or 3 days, so I can give you exercises to do, but this will take a little longer. So not a weekend kind of a deal. So yeah, I don't know if you have any more questions. If not, we will wrap it up for today, and then maybe we'll see you tomorrow for the canter. It's a kind of an interesting topic too. And yeah, Elizabeth says, I love the realistic time frames. Slow development is key to good health. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you can't. That's one of those things that just takes time. There's nothing you can do to speed it up. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Hopefully, there's some useful information in it. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.